Well, welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. Syria accused Israel of carrying out 2 airstrikes near the capital Damascus on Sunday. Israel has not officially responded to the allegations, but reports in Israeli media say that the targets were storage facilities loaded with S-300 anti-aircraft missiles due to be sent to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Well, the Assad regime has been heavily backed by Iran and their proxy militia Hezbollah. They're also key players in the fight against the Islamic State in Syria and Lebanon. With us in the studio to discuss the issue are Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waked. Thank you both for being with us. But before we get into the discussion, the question we asked our viewers is if Israel did in fact carry out the airstrikes, or was it purely defensive?
Good evening, David. So the strikes in Syria on Sunday have been attributed to the Israeli Air Force, but they were likely intended to prevent the transfer of weaponry from Iran to Hezbollah. So if this was an Israeli operation, is it a fair defense strategy? We invited our viewers to join the debate. We asked them, if Israel did strike Syria, was it purely out of self-defense? Now, we know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said in the past that Israel will not allow the transfer of weapons across the Syrian border and into the hands of Hezbollah. Let's see what our viewers thought of the strike, assuming Israel was involved. As you can see, David, 81% said yes, that Israel was protecting itself if indeed it was involved in the strike. Only 14% voted no. But let's review what our viewers shared with us today on Twitter and Facebook. First up, we have Ulysses, who tells us leaders in Israel have never started wars. So this too was in defense for security. A straightforward point of view there to kick off with, but it also resonates the prevalent fear of an attack from Iran, which according to estimates is involved in transferring weapons to Hezbollah. Our next respondent, Ving, looks at the bigger picture here, and he asks, where is the evidence that Israel did it? Did their government admit it? And this is an important point to keep in mind in this discussion, as there was no formal announcement from the Israeli side regarding the strike. Let's take a look, though, at one more comment. Nicole, who wrote to us on our French channel, she tells us Hezbollah has posed a threat to Israel several times before. Israel is protecting itself in the same way that the international coalition is protecting itself against terrorism. She adds, no one would put this question to the international coalition. So this is an interesting take, as it assumes that Israel is involved in the strike, and in fact, it justifies it. So is there a difference between Israel protecting itself against Hezbollah and the international coalition fighting terrorism in the Middle East? Is the international community in fact more prone to criticize Israel's actions? I'm sure you and your guests will have more to say about this in your debate, David. Sending it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ivan Sixek, for that look at our viewers who seem convinced about this. Ali, if not purely defensive, what would the motive be for the strike?
Well, David, I think that in the last couple of days, and here in Israel, because of the elections and because of other issues, Syria was far a little bit from the attention of the media. And what happened in Syria in the last days, it was once again a progress of the regime in the region of Aleppo, and a success operation of the Syrian regime against the rebels in the very important eastern region of Deir ez-Zor.
Syrian regime backed by Hezbollah.
Exactly, and what I understand from my sources in Syria, that there was a huge frustration from the side of the rebels, from the international community, from the fact that the opposition allies in the West and in the Arab countries were not capable to support and to back the rebels in this very sensitive moments, and that the Israeli strike, beside the fact that they wanted to stop transfer of weapons from Syria to Lebanon, has also a goal to raise the morale of the rebels in Syria, that they are allies to the Syrian opposition, and that they are willing to support when it is needed. Of course, this is the main issue that the Syrian regime is focusing. We heard the Syrian foreign minister saying that there is no military targets that that were attacked in these strikes, and that the only goal is to raise the mission. And this is why the Syrian had no shame to publish that Israel attacked the airport and another site.
Well, now, it's not the first time. I mean, in the past years throughout this conflict in Syria, there's been many airstrikes now that have been attributed to Israel, of course, not taking official responsibility for them. We've seen strikes take place at night, during the day, against Damascus, some of the most heavily defended airspace in the entire region now. If this was Israel, and it's assumed that it was, what message does this send to the greater Middle East, to the world? What's the significance of Israel basically launching strikes at will?
Well, I think as you've suggested, this is one of a series of airstrikes by Israel against targets within Syria. But not only that, also a number of other operations that Israel has undoubtedly been carrying out, which it will not acknowledge and quite rightly won't acknowledge, and we can only speculate as we can over this. Carrying out operations to interdict the movement of munitions, some of which emanate from Iran, into various groups that want to attack Israel. Hezbollah in this case, perhaps. In other cases, weapons that were destined to end up in the hands of Hamas. It's quite right that Israel should do that. They should be sending the message out that if you attempt to get munitions into the hands of people who want to kill our civilian population or attack our soldiers, then we will do whatever we need to do to stop it.
I mean, this is the only outside power that's launched any direct strikes against the regime. The U.S., the coalition, no one's been willing to do this.
No, indeed, and partly, not entirely, partly that's because people are very confused about who they should and should not be attacking, siding with, and trying to undermine in Syria.
Israel's drawn some clear red lines.
Israel clearly has direct interest in defending its own people, and my concern is actually that the international community, NATO, Western countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, are not themselves doing more to back Israel up in this fight. Israel is a key ally of the West, and other countries like the United Kingdom, the United States, should be acting to prevent weapons eventually ending up in the hands of Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. And some of that can be done by naval blockades and by interdiction.
It seems for now, no one aside from Israel, perhaps, is willing to even enter the airspace of the Syrian regime right now. Ali, Hezbollah heavily entrenched in the Syrian fight now. It seems that the Assad regime may not have survived without Hezbollah's input here. Their mission is to face off against Israel in southern Lebanon. Where does this take Hezbollah now after years of being entrenched in this conflict? Where do they stand in the region, and what's their mission at this point?
Well, I think that Hezbollah is capable to face Israel simultaneously when it is leading this campaign in Syria and on the Syrian soil. But I think that
they're strong enough to have forces to still face the Israel Defense Force, despite being entrenched in Syria.
We saw that in some occasions Hezbollah even took the initiative to launch bombs in the borders between Israel and Hezbollah, with some Israeli soldiers who were injured in the operation. So if Hezbollah was not enough confident that he can manage to face Israel, he wouldn't launch these initiatives, and even took responsibility for these initiatives and explained that these initiatives were retaliation to Israeli offenses. But David, I want to mention, Colonel talked about the Israeli right to self-protect itself and its citizens, but it is not an accident that the strike came when the UN published a report saying and mentioning a very tight coordination between Israel and between the Syrian rebels, allowing rebels to pass from inside Syria to from inside Israel to one part towards another part of the borders, logistic support, and
as well as transferring hundreds of wounded from all sides into Israel.
Exactly. And in I-24 News, we interviewed Syrians from the Golan Heights, from the Israeli part of the Golan Heights, mentioning that they saw jihadists who were transferred to the Israeli hospitals and then allowing them to get back to the region, which means that Israel maybe is a key ally of the West in this region, but Israel appears to be also a key actor in the Syrian arena.
Again, do you see Russia now stepping up? First of all, we're dancing around the if Israel launched these strikes or how involved Israel is. Reports emerge from here and there, nothing directly coming out of the Israeli government for understandable reasons. If not Israel, who is a plausible perpetrator of these types of strikes in Syria?
Well, I don't think anyone else would be likely to launch these attacks. I can't think of anyone. I mean, I think that we all know who did it, but of course we can't be 100% certain, as the Israeli government hasn't acknowledged it. But I think we can be pretty clear on who did it and why they did it. And
well, we've seen some interesting reports recently. I think it was in the Telegraph, the British Daily Telegraph, about a secret mission by British special forces in Lebanon to stave off some jihadist offensives, to save some Christian village. What does that say about perhaps a deeper involvement by Western forces in the region that we're not hearing about?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of exaggeration, there's a lot of, as always, smoke and mirrors over special forces operations, and rightly too. It's quite right that they become more effective, they become more mysterious.
Part of the tactic.
Very much so. And we've certainly seen, shall we say, media speculation about British Special Forces activity deep into Iraq against the Islamic State in Iraq, which is unacknowledged, unspecified, but nevertheless is almost, I would say, I don't have any inside information, I would say is almost certainly taking place. So we're seeing, on the one hand, we're seeing a kind of repudiation of any idea of boots on the ground from people like President Obama, Prime Minister Cameron and so on, while at the same time there's no question that they're doing as much as they feel they can without going all the way to deploying substantial ground forces, which, with a visible presence and that can't be denied.
Ali, you allude to it somewhat, that this is a complex situation now. This conflict across the border from Israel has got a lot of players involved. The Jaffa al-Nusra, the Free Syrian Army, the Assad regime, Hezbollah, Islamic State militants, the Israeli army, allegedly.
The Russian Navy that is there
exactly, the Russians.
At Tartus port and establishing like a compound of the Russian army in the region.
Naval base.
Exactly, and Russia, who is preventing any decision of the international community to create an isolated flight zone in the region, mainly between Syria and Turkey, so the Syrian army will be capable to strike whenever it is needed. But we should pay attention, David, to one more detail, that Russia asked Israel for explanation. According to
this hasn't happened before.
Exactly. According to the chemical weapons agreement, in which Syrian regime accepted to evacuate most of the, actually all of the chemical weapons from Syria, the interpretation, the analysis of the Russians to this agreement is that the international community gave them some responsibility to the air to the Syrian air, and Israel, offended by these strikes, this Russian hegemony and Russian responsibility for the flight zone in Syria. And this is very interesting to follow, whether the Russian will be more directly involved in an attack, and whether the talks about an agreement between Walid al-Muallim, the Syrian foreign minister, and Lavrov for strengthening the military coordination will create a more tough, even a threat from Russia towards Israel and towards the international community, whenever and if it dares to attack the Syrian regime, like, for example, the Saudis are demanding as part of the
Israelis have dared to attack, and this is Russian hardware. I mean, the Russians have shipped plane loads of weapons, sophisticated weapon systems to the Assad regime. They've been a lifeline for the Assad regime in this war. Do you think that Russia has a right to be offended that Israel might go after some of this equipment, the equipment that they think threatens them?
Well, call me a conspiracy theorist if you wish, but I would be very surprised if we see any, maybe apart from a little bit of theatre, any direct conflict between either Russia and Israel, or Russia and any other Western powers. I think there's a great deal more under-the-table coordination taking place than we perhaps might know about or even think possible. So I'm not saying I wouldn't exclude the possibility. And look at the situation.
Is it a PR show? I mean, why Russia? Why are they coming out now with this?
Of course, there's continuous discussion and coordination and liaison between Russia and Israel over pretty much any military matter that affects both of them. But obviously, to bring it out into the public now, Russia wants to send a message, and as it's done many times over similar kind of clashes and conflicts in Eastern Europe that have been going on recently, and indeed, the same kind of situation is likely to emerge if we do see greater Western engagement against the Assad regime in Syria.
Do you think that's coming? Do you think there's a chance for greater Western involvement now against the regime after so many years?
Not against Assad, I don't think. No, I think I think the West has changed its mind. I think the West has now come to the conclusion that Assad needs to be where he is.
Well, Turkey, a key NATO ally, is calling for strikes against the Assad
Exactly, and I
regime.
tend to agree with our colonel, because we saw that what is happening right now in the city of Aleppo, the very strategic, important city of Aleppo, is the same scenario that took place a month ago in Homs, where the international community, and now we have the UN envoy trying to convince the rebels, trying to convince the Arab states and Turkey, who are supporting the rebels, for a withdrawal of the rebels from Aleppo. So we have Damascus clear from any rebel signs, Homs clear from any rebel signs, and now the city of Aleppo. It will be a huge moral hit for the rebels and for their regional allies, and an encouraging sign for the regime.
Hard to follow the front lines in this situation, perhaps impossible to truly pick out the sides in this complex conflict. Well, thank you both for helping us decipher at least this latest round up there in Syria. Ali Waked and Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you both for being with us. And we'll be back after another short break here with One on One. Don't miss it.